The Sega 32X was released in late 1994, and for its first few months appeared to be a big hit for Sega. The tides turned quickly, however, and a few months later, it was obvious the system was not the future. Many folks would like to blame the Sega 32X for the fall of Sega, though I would argue the 32X was a symptom of mismanagement and not the cause. In either case, here are 5 great games for Sega's doomed add-on. Afterburner was released in arcades in 1987, with this Sega 32X port following in 1995. The gameplay is pretty chaotic, as you fly your F-14 Tomcat through 23 different levels, trying to not die while scoring as many points as possible. The game's intro screen make this one seem rather easy, but the game is actually fairly difficult. Your Tomcat is equipped with a standard machine gun, but more importantly, you can lock onto enemies and then blast them out of the sky with a missile. Afterburner was one of Sega's superscaler games, using sprite scaling to help simulate a 3D environment. Unlike previous home versions, this Sega 32X port actually retains the sprite scaling, and it's quite impressive. Nearly everything on the screen scales from small blips on the horizon to fully detailed enemies right in front of you. The game really showcases the 2D processing power of the Sega 32X and is an absolute feast for the senses. The soundtrack sounds like it's straight from Top Gun, and the firing and explosion sounds are loud and satisfying. While playing, you'll hear the roar of the jet engines, someone yelling fire, and a constant barrage of explosions. Afterburner on the 32X is pretty great. I love racing games, and Virtua Racing Deluxe on the Sega 32X does not disappoint. This is another Sega arcade conversion, debuting in arcades in 1992, and this version launching with the Sega 32X in 1994. Virtua Racing Deluxe is a fully 3D polygon racer, featuring primitive flat-shaded models for your car and tracks. The Formula 1 inspired car and the 3 tracks from the arcade game are all present, but this deluxe version also adds 2 new cars and 2 new tracks. The presentation is pure Sega. From the moment you fire this one up and the announcer shouts out Virtual Racing, to the end of a race when the Game Over jingle plays, the game is entertaining, giving you the feeling of playing a 90s arcade game. Even better is the gameplay. The controls are dated for sure, but Virtua Racing Deluxe is still exceptionally playable. Your car controls well with the D-pad, and the feel here is perfect. You always know how much farther you can push it before you spin out. Virtua Racing Deluxe is my favorite game on the 32X, and easily surpasses both the Genesis version and even the Saturn port. This is a must-own. Blackthorne is a cinematic platformer, which were all the rage in the mid-90s. There were 2 home ports, one on the Super Nintendo and this one on the Sega 32X. The 32X version is the superior of the 2, and even contains an exclusive snow level not found in any other version of the game. Unlike traditional side-scrolling action games, Blackthorne feels quite rigid, as if the game doesn't want you to perform any feats of strength a normal human couldn't normally do. Every step Kyle takes is deliberate and seems confined to a grid. The combat is also unique. When you have your shotgun out, you can hide by pressing up. The enemies also hide. This means you have to stop, learn the shooting pattern of the specific enemy, whether he fires once, twice, or 3 times, and then only come out of the shadows to shoot once it's safe. Blackthorne's level design is what puts it over the top. Each stage is large, yet nothing ever gets overwhelming or confusing. They must be played through in a specific way, with item collecting and light puzzle solving preventing you from wandering too far off course. The quality here is outstanding, from the graphics and sound to the controls and level design. Blackthorne is definitely one of the better games for Sega's little add-on. Virtua Fighter was one of the final titles released for the Sega 32X and definitely has a second generation feel to it, making you wonder what the system would have been capable of if it wasn't abandoned so quickly. The frame rate is incredibly smooth, and the animation of the fighters is really impressive. Not only that, the controls are excellent, and Virtua Fighter is one of the few fighting games I've spent a lot of time playing. There are only 3 buttons, block, punch, and kick, with very few of the moves requiring more than 3 button presses. While Virtua Fighter tends to be regarded as a hardcore fighting game, I found the limited buttons and slower gameplay a perfect way to get into the genre. Many also consider this superior to the initial Saturn offering, featuring few bugs and glitches. Those were later addressed with updates and sequels, but it's still an interesting footnote in the history of the Sega 32X. Virtua Fighter may not be the best 3D fighting game ever, but this is still an awesome game and belongs in every 32X collection. 32X Doom gets a lot of flack for featuring poor colors, poor lighting effects, a lackluster soundtrack, and taking place in a tiny window. I would love to rip into this game and make fun of all of its shortcomings, but I can't. Despite its issues, this is still an awesome game. In fact, this is the first version of Doom I've ever played, and I've put significantly more time into this port of Doom than any other. The controls work well with the Genesis D-pad and 6 face buttons. The frame rate is fairly solid, and overall, the game is still an absolute blast to play. Doom's level design is outstanding, and I'm still discovering new secrets after all these years. The core of the game involves finding different color key cards to unlock new sections of the level. The light puzzle elements blend perfectly with the fast-paced action, and Doom strikes the perfect balance of action and exploring. The music doesn't bother me either. It's atmospheric and moody and fairly representative of what most gamers would have heard in 1993. The instrument samples are sometimes questionable, but you could say that about many American-released games on the Genesis and 32X. Overall, even a substandard version of Doom is better than most games released in the 90s, and 32X Doom is a standout title for the Sega 32X. So there you have it, 5 great titles for the Sega 32X. Now, I didn't realize it when compiling this list, but all 5 of these games are actually ports, and that gives me an idea for a future 32X video.